Got it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Might be Allison from last week, so double check. Makes sense, yeah. Thank you, man. Wrong way. Okay, we are broadcasting and we are going live on Facebook. Here we go. 3, 2, and 1. Just sharing it on 2 more pages and we'll be good to go. We're live on YouTube, we're live on Zoom, and we're now live on Facebook. And I know you guys come for the singing, so I'll be done. I'll do my singing and then we'll learn Torah. I did that special for you, said Torah. Someone needs to mute themselves. I'll send them our mute. Manny, we're starting. Manny, you came for class, right? We're about to go. Okay. We covered all our tech platforms, and we are good to go. We are now standing just about 26 hours before the incredible Yom Tov of Shavuos that is coming upon us. On Friday, we will sit in shul or stand in shul, and we will read the Ten Commandments for the 3,336th time since the day that God gave it to us at Sinai. Most incredible moment in human history. But Shavuos is not as simplistic as some would like to think. So I'm going to share with you an in-depth discourse, an in-depth analysis of Shavuos that was authored by the Rebbe on the second day of Shavuos in the year 1977. So a couple of years before I was born, on the second day of Yom Tov, when there used to be a Farbrengen. So the Rebbe addressed the Yom Tov of Shavuos and spoke about the 3 key figures that are mostly known for their connection to Shavuos. Who are the 3 figures? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, who the Torah was given to us through Moses, to the point that in the book of Joshua it's referred to Torah's Moshe, it's referred to the Torah of Moshe. The second one is King David HaMelech. Why? Because David Meis Batzeretz, because King David passed away in the year 837 BCE, passed away on Shavuos. And the third one is the Baal Shem Tov, who also passed away on Shavuos, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who passed away in the year 1760 on the holiday of Shavuos. And since everything that happens in the world, Jewish or non-Jewish, but especially when you're dealing with something so profound like the holiday of Shavuos, especially things that happen to great leaders, kings, leaders, prophets of the Jewish people, there needs to be a connection between the 3. And what's the connection between Moses, David, and the Baal Shem Tov? And second, what makes each one of them unique in their connection to Shavuos? And obviously, what does that have to do with us? So A, what is their uniqueness? B, what's the commonality? And C, what does it have to do with us as we are about to approach this incredible 48 hours of spiritual bliss and holiness that's embedded in the holiday of Shavuos? So let's talk about what they have in common first. The Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic movement, King David, the first of the Davidic kings, and Moses. So what they have in common is leadership and kingship. The power that comes with leadership. Moses was the first Nasi, the first leader of the Jewish people. According to the Rambam says this in the book of Kings, in the laws of Kings, in the last book of Shoftim, in the book of Judges, in the section on Kings, he says that Moses was not only a leader, but he was technically a king. He was the king of the Jewish people. King David was the first king to ever be anointed as a king of the Davidic dynasty, and that all kings of David for all future have to go they have to be descendants of David and Solomon. And the Baal Shem Tov was the leader and founder, the revolutionary leader that created the Hasidic movement, the general Hasidic movement, not Chabad, but all of the Hasidic movement. Therefore, there has to be a connection between these three leaders and Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, which happened on Shavuos. Because on the holiday of Shavuos, it wasn't just the giving of the Torah. A lot of people get caught up because it is. I mean, we did get the Torah. But who got the Torah? Mamleches, God said to us that you will be for me, Mamleches Koyanim v'Goy Kodesh. You will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. God chose us at Sinai to be a holy priestly people. And therefore, it's very much connected to the power that comes with being chosen by God to have a specific role as a representative of holiness and a representative of priesthood to the world. What's the connection between that and kingship? It's pretty straightforward. What does kingship really mean? You know, we live in America. Officially, America doesn't have kings since we got rid of King George. Manny always talks about, right? Manny's very into the red coats. You don't like King George? Manny, he has these books he used to read and videos called Liberty's Kids. He's very into that. But what is kingship? It's a king is at a point of elevation, right? Uplifted above the rest of the nation. According to Jewish law, a king is not allowed to do malacha. What if a king decides he wants to be a shoe polish? He wants to polish shoes. He's not allowed to. A king is not allowed to. A king has to have everything provided.
I wanted to ask you, get me a book.
We're not using the book today.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
When a king has to have everything provided for them. Melech b'yafeh tachzanenech. All the king's got to do is roll out in all his glory. There is no thing that the king should have to deal with. It's all provided for him by the people, by his nation. And that's why halacha says that a king can break any boundary. You can't stop. You want to plow through, right? They call eminent domain. Maybe in America, there's an issue over eminent domain, right? Because we're not in a kingship. We're not in a kingdom. We're in a republic. But in a kingdom, it says that a king says, and he removes mountains. You move mountains. So Matan Torah was the day that God uplifted the Jewish people and gifted us this incredible thing, each of us, incredible thing called kingship, which means we operate like a king in the sense that we operate above the norm. Everything operates on one platform, on one frequency, and the Jewish people, ever since Sinai, we operate on our own frequency. What does that mean? It means that when Jews follow God's Torah, when we learn Torah and we do mitzvahs, everything that we need is provided for us. It's provided. It's handed to us on a gift. If we put our trust in Hashem, not just because we're Jewish and we want to walk around demanding things, right? Demanding reparation or demanding that you owe me something. Or I'm Jewish, you got to give me something. No. That's not what he's talking about. If we operate in the way we think and the way we speak and the way we live our lives as if we are above nature, that we don't give so much credence and so much attention and so much, we don't put all our cards into the realm of nature, but we recognize that at Sinai, God uplifted us and we operate on our own plane, things get a lot easier because when you're operating in a space of supernatural, above nature, you don't have to play the same game as those that operate within the realm of nature. So it's not just a mentality of egoism or being arrogant. I'm a king. God chose me at Sinai. God forbid. It's not about arrogance. It's factual. At Sinai, God uplifted us by giving us a Torah. And if we stick with this Torah, we remain in a Sinai state. What is a Sinai? Not a cyanide. A Sinai state, which is a state of spirituality and holiness, which allows you to operate in a place of above nature, overcoming the normal, natural obstacles because you're not limited by the laws of nature because you're operating with God who's infinite, which is above nature. And so then you don't have to battle with the world. You're floating above it. You're not worried about the world being your enemy. You're not worried about Iran, Ukraine, the stock market. You're not worried. You're operating l'mayla b'derech hateva, like the Jewish people have survived for the last 3,335 years. But here comes the million-dollar question, and the Rebbe addressed this question already in 1977. The question hasn't become less, it's become stronger. But the question was, when the Jews are standing at Sinai and they have all their needs taken care of, because God is going to give them whatever they need, and God is revealing himself on the mountain. So you could say the bodily issues, the materialistic issues, the physical stuff are not an obstacle because you're operating on a different plane. But when my soul is in a body, and I'm very much connected to the materialistic world and to the physical temptations and to the physical challenges financially and to the physical challenges with health, how in the world do you want me truthfully to try to operate above nature when I feel so bogged down by nature, by everything that's natural? So what's the answer? How does a Jew remind themselves and uplift themselves to a Sinai state? For that, you need to have a king or a leader in your life or in the collective Jewish life that can take you there. So who are those three? We have three that are connected specifically with this idea of Shavuos, and that is Moses, King David, and the Baal Shem Tov, who each in their own way allowed and taught us how we can uplift ourselves and operate in a almost miraculous way. And each one of them in their own life operated that way, starting from Moses' entire operation, taking the Jews out of Egypt, leading them in the desert, everything was miraculous. So it was one big walking miracle. From the moment he took them out of Egypt, I mean, even before the 10 plagues, taking them out of Egypt, giving them the Torah, manna, water, well of water, clouds of glory, and no snakes, no scorpions, splitting of the sea. And it was one big miracle. King David was in the book. King David was already in Israel, right? It represents the Jewish people, not in the desert, but in the land of Israel. And in Israel, he composed the majority of the book of Psalms. And in the book of Psalms, what do we figure out? We figure out that he had a lot of miracles and wonders. God saved him here. God saved him here. He saved him from his son. Like Mick told us, he saved him from his son Absalom. He saved him from Saul. He saved him. Yes, he had tribulation. It wasn't as miraculous as in the desert with Moses, but it was pretty darn good. Then you have the Baal Shem Tov, and anyone that knows, even till today, in the lingo of traditional Jews, there's a term called a Baal Shemske Maisa, a story like the Baal Shem Tov. Meaning, anytime you hear an incredible story of miracles, it's automatically associated to the last 300 years with a story that happened or could have happened with the Baal Shem Tov. Why? Because the Baal Shem Tov operated in a very, very miraculous way, and it really represents these three individuals and these three lifestyles represent something that's very unique in the way that the revelation at Sinai took place. And it's divided into three layers of spiritual internalization and spiritual recognition that are each reflected in one of those individuals. First, you had the essential revelation of godliness when God came down the mountain and taught the Jews the first two of the 10 commandments. But that was an entirely supernatural event. But it was very temporary. It was very short. The Jews couldn't handle it. Two commandments, and they begged Moses to ask God if he can give the rest, the other 8. So it was the most incredible revelation that ever existed, but it was very short-lived. Then you had when God sort of removed himself directly from the mountain, and there was still a revelation, right? Moses was still giving the Torah, and there was still godliness flowing from the mountain. And it made life easier because there was more spirituality, but it wasn't the same. And that could last a little longer. It actually carried on with the Jews into the desert. So they carried some of that supernatural activity, not as much as God himself revealing himself at Sinai, but some of that was carried with them into the desert. And the third is the ultimate of all of that. What's the ultimate? God came at Sinai, Moses, the desert. What was the goal of all of it? The goal of it was the whole purpose of Sinai was for each and every one of us today to take the incredible values of the Torah, the teachings of the Torah, the mitzvahs, and utilize it to make heaven and earth kiss. Right? Heaven and earth were separated through all the sins. So, spirituality's over there and physicality's over here. They don't really connect. I'm Jewish only when I'm in shul. That's a church thing. In Judaism, there's no such thing. Right? What's the most popular place for spirituality in Judaism? What's the most important place for spirituality in Judaism? No, in your home. Your home. Shul is secondary. Your heart, naturally. I mean, you're not going to do it in your home or your heart if it's not. You had a question?
No, just thinking. Well, yeah, always questions, but
You have to write them down like last week.
I'm taking a break this week though.
So the third level is, how do you take all of that holiness and natural activity and bring it into the reality of our mission, which is to change the world for the better, in the darkness, in the exile, in the challenges, find the way to transform it. And these three represent three periods in Jewish history. The first is the period of Moses. Sinai, Exodus, splitting of the sea, the desert, right? The Jews were physical people, but everything about their operation was in a way of unnatural, but in a positive way. It was just totally supernatural. That's why he says the Torah was given. You know who earned the Torah? Those who ate manna. In order to get that to operate on that kind of frequency, you had to get the manna, meaning it was all interconnected. Everything you did was on a very, very different, miraculous type of operation. Then when the Jews went into Israel, and the Jews went into Eretz Yisrael, a land where God looks after from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, has a special relationship with Hashem, and they had to work the land. Nevertheless, even though they had to work the land, they really just had to make a vessel. In other words, they had to make a vessel for God's blessings, but the blessings that came to them was in an incredible way. Israel sees miracles that most places never could imagine seeing. Right? Golda Meir once said that God took us through the desert for 40 years to take us to the only spot in the Middle East that has no oil. And yet, what did Israel turn into? Not because we have a good army, and not because we have a good prime minister, and not because of this. Yes, we have a good army. It's true. We pray for them all the time. They're the most incredible human beings you'll meet. But that's not what made Israel the great gift that it is. Because we didn't have Tzahal, we didn't have the IDF in the days of Joshua, and we still saw miracles in the land of Israel. We still saw incredible growth that came out of the ground. How? Because it's a special land representing still supernatural. Yes, we work harder than in the desert, but it's still a supernatural result. But then there's the time of exile, when you don't see godliness and you don't see God very much. And yet in that, you're supposed to find the way to bring spirituality. And sure, Moses represented a time where spirituality was accessible. Literally, everything you needed was dropped from heaven. Wealth, health, everything came from it. But that's a temporary way of living. And it's obviously a way that you can feel like a king, right? Everything's provided for you. And the Jews did. They marched through the desert like kings. Even their laundry was taken care of by the clouds of glory. Then they got into Israel. They still felt very much being sustained from God. They didn't feel like they were the declaration of independence. They didn't feel like they're independent of God. They felt very much dependent on God. They did their thing, but it was still an incredible way of experiencing God in your life. And that was in King David's era. Right? King David was the leader, like Moses was the leader in the desert. King David was the leader that showed the Jews how they shouldn't overdo the vessel. Right? If you make too much of a vessel, someone says, "Oh, I love my clothing. Let's make a lot of it." Your pants will fall off if it's too big. What do you mean? You want to put more material? It makes no sense. Just because it's a nice pair of pants, it has to fit. Too much is no good. Too little is no good either. Too tight or too big. It has to fit. To make a vessel for God's blessings, you got to make a vessel, but not overdo it. Not sacrifice your relationship with God because you're trying to make a vessel when God is the one giving you the stuff to put in the vessel. So King David was the leader who was able to show the Jewish people, right? He passed away on Shavuos. He's connected to Shavuos because he taught the Jews of his era how to bring godliness, how to make you a Jewish nation and a priestly kingdom in a way that you're not forgetting who you are. But then we hit a place where not only are you busy with making a living, it's called tirdes parnasa. You're burdened to make a living. And that represents the time of exile. The temples were destroyed. We've gone into exile. We've been in exile almost 2,000 years with no temple, with no recognition of that level of spirituality. And in those moments, you want me to feel like a king? You want a Jew today to walk around feeling like, I'm chosen, I rock, I have Sinai, I have divine revelation, I can operate above nature, I'm going to rock this. Mamlechas Koyanim. Who's going to be the leader that's going to kick our pants, give us a kick in the pants and say, even in the darkest of exiles, even in the moments that we're so immersed in trying to earn a living. And the Rebbe talks about this with a lot of angst, how hard it is for people to make a living and how hard it is to stay healthy. And you don't want it to be so hard. You want to find God in this. You want to feel like God is sustaining you in this. And yet it's hard. So who comes along? Comes along the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov, whose yard site is on Shavuos. And he's the one that helps us appreciate the Shavuos moment in our generation when we're in the darkest of dark exiles. How does he do that, the Baal Shem Tov? What was one of the key things the Baal Shem Tov pumped? There was three things that he pumped about, that he spoke a lot about. The importance of never forgetting that everything is by divine providence. That absolutely everything is, every little detail in our life is orchestrated by divine providence, by Hashgacha Pratis, that a Jew has to serve God with joy, and that you have to love everyone with incredible love. But think about that. The Baal Shem Tov comes along in a dark place where Jews are trying to figure out how they should maintain a relationship with spirituality, and not only spirituality, but operate above nature. Take the revelation of Sinai that Moses could do in the desert and King David can internalize in Israel. And the Baal Shem Tov wants the Jew in Bozeman in 2023 in exile, She'ein Kedugmasa, in the darkest, a double and quadruple darkness of exile, where Judaism is being pummeled by secularism, and we're supposed to stand strong and remember that we are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, and stay upbeat. And be a king and recognize we can move mountains and we can plow through fields. We've got this. We're supernatural. How do you do that? What did the Baal Shem Tov teach us? If we internalize how everything that goes on in our life is by divine providence, that every single aspect in our life is a miraculous gift of God. Every breath. Right, walking out this morning at, 6 o'clock, I went outside. The sun was up already for almost an hour. And take just a deep breath in this beautiful gift. And to recognize that every aspect of our life is godly and that we aren't limited by the laws of nature. We have the ability, just like the Jews in the desert. It's a little harder to get there, but we have the ability to find the supernatural within nature. To start operating in a different perspective. You know, when those guys came to me, a few people came to me, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, Rabbi, what's going to be with Iran? With the Iran deal? No? 10 years later, how are we doing? No? So you think it's because the IDF keeps bombing their places, which is probably true, although I don't think the IDF ever admitted that they did it. But whoever it is, the ghost that keeps bombing all the uranium. It's true. God has interesting messengers. Like Yoni Netanyahu was a messenger in Entebbe with his team. God has interest. God operates with all different types of messengers. But to not recognize that it represents a supernatural way of operating for a Jew, we are not limited and confined by these silly laws of nature. At Sinai, God said, Habibi, Mamlechas Koyanim. I'm giving you a Torah because you guys operate supernatural. Take this Torah, stick with the Torah that will keep you above nature and operating in your own plane. And you can't say, well, Moses was 3,000 years ago. King David was 2,500 years ago. No, what do we say at Kiddush Levana when we sanctify the moon every month? One of the most famous Jewish prayers, and most Jews don't know where it comes from. That's where it comes from Kiddush Levana when we sanctify the moon, but they sing it all the time. David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. David, right? What does that mean? Yeah. No. King David, the king of Israel, it lives for all eternity, right? What does that mean? King David lives. What does he live? He's buried in Yerushalayim. What do you mean he lives? He lives because his values and what he taught his generation applies today just as much as it did then, which is that we are each able to be on that spiritual level and operate supernaturally. So if you wanted to divide up the world into what's the three primary forms of connecting to Hashem? It's in ethics of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Torah, Avodah represents prayer, and Gemilut Chasadim means action. In Moses' generation, it was Torah, right? Because he gave the Torah. What did that mean? Torah comes from above and is delivered to below. You don't give Torah, you get Torah. We receive the Torah from God. We say every day in our prayers, Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who chose us from all of the nations, v'nasan lanu es Torah, saying gave us his Torah. We were gifted a Torah. And so that represents a type of supernatural or holiness or godliness that just gets plopped onto us, because in that generation they were ready for that. That was the primary way of operating, because that's what they were able to do. Then came King David. King David wrote Psalms. It was very much about prayer. What kind of prayer? A unique type of prayer that's instantly answered. Like Rashbi, it says about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai that all he had to do was say certain words, Hine matovu manayim, and boom, it rained. Right away the rain started coming down. He didn't even finish the sentence. King David operated with that kind of prayer, meaning he understood, you got to pray, you got to do your part. They were in Israel, they were still spiritually inclined, but they had to do their part. But the results come about, and the spirituality, you get to see the results pretty quickly. But then came along the Baal Shem Tov, and he revealed how God's oneness in our world is not just in prayer when things are fantastic. It's not just in Torah when things are even more divine and more revealed in spirituality, but even in a world that's down to the most practical of experiences. Even in a mundane, materialistic, physical world full of garbage, full of hazarai, in that world we can reveal the oneness of God. How? By passionate, pious, pure acts. Do a mitzvah with piety, with purity, and with passion. What do you call the PPP, right? It's a PPP loan. You know, during COVID, they had the PPP loans. Passion, piety, and purity. Baal Shem Tov showed us how even in the darkest of experiences, we can find the oneness of God through a pure good deed, because in that good deed is the revelation of godliness, revelation of holiness, which is what Shavuos is all about. Remember, the third aspect of Shavuos was not the revelation, not the carrying on of the supernatural activity, but the heaven and earth kissing, transforming the world and taking the physical and making it holy. So when we do that, like the Baal Shem Tov taught us how we can do that, we're truly experiencing the Torah in the greatest way. Because what is Torah if not the transformation of the world with the values, holiness, purity, piety, and passion that exists within Judaism? So in a sense, I have to be careful how I say this, because it's not a degrading statement, that with all due respect to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, and with all due respect to David HaMelech, to King David, the greatest accomplishment for the goal of why the Torah was given to us in the first place, which culminates obviously with the coming of Mashiach, because then it's full circle. We got a Torah, we were told what to do with it, how to do it, what to do with the world, and that brings us eventually to a messianic state. But the leader, the king, that guides us and guided us in the darkest of exile, how to make that come to fruition, was not Moses. He was in a supernatural era. It wasn't King David, who was still in the land of Israel with a lot of super duper miracles. It's in the time when there's no miracles. In the time when all you see is darkness and challenges and secularism and BS, and the world looks like it's a beis meshugoyim, like it's one big mental home. It's not a normal place. When you look at the world, you give a cook and you say, what happened to my beautiful world? People are cuckoo. The world has gone bananas. And it's right there in those moments that the Baal Shem Tov taught us how to reveal godliness there and how to power through like a king, because he gave us the gift of leadership in a state of darkness. To be a leader when everything's at light is like being a flashlight in front of the sunlight. A flashlight in the sunlight, that darkness, you don't need it. Be a flashlight when it's dark. Be a leader with principles, with backbone, with Torah values, with purity, passion, and piety. When things are dark is something the Baal Shem Tov taught us how to do with Chassidus. And when we do it, we bring the culmination of what this is all about. We don't live here like a bunch of flaky things that just bounce around, trying to figure out what ism we're going to follow today. We're not an ism people. We're Torah. We're Chassidus. And it shows us how we can truly be the light, the supernatural force in this world. So we don't have to worry. So what's going to be with interest rates? I don't know. Whatever will be, will be. I'm a Yid. What does it have to do? I'm a Yid. I operate on a different plane. I operate in a heavenly abode. I'm in the world. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. I'm going to go to work for a living. I'm going to be a good father, a good wife, a good husband, a good mother, a good bubby. I'm going to be a good business person. I'm going to be ethical and honest, but I'm not going to get anxious. Anxious about what? 3,335 years we're operating. We've powered through the Philistines and the Byzantines and the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians, every fakakta nation that ever came about. We're still here to tell the tale. The Nazis and the Inquisition, von alle Seiten, wherever you turn. When's the last time you met someone who said, I'm a proud Spaniard because I'm a descendant of the Inquisition, the Inquisitors. I'm a proud descendant of Eichmann. A proud descendant of the Pharaoh. You ever went on a plane and someone said, I'm a proud Pharaohite? I'm a proud descendant of the Pharaoh? I'm a proud descendant of Nero or Titus or Hadrian? When's the last time you met someone on a plane and said, I'm a great-grandson of Plato? Kadachis, no one would even know. Most people on the plane wouldn't even know who Plato was. Aristotle, only Mick would know who Aristotle was. No one else. And yet, every plane you board in almost any country in the world, if you're wearing a yarmulke, there's going to be another Jew on the plane gives you that look like, oh, one of us. How's that possible? It's possible because we operate supernatural. And the Baal Shem Tov didn't want us just to walk around with the identity. Oh, I'm a Yid, I'm a Jew, right? It's geschmack to be a Yid, geschmack to be a Yid. You don't know our new national anthem? Come to Friday night dinner or Shabbos lunch, you'll find out. But the point is, it's more. The Baal Shem Tov taught us how to see godliness in every moment of our life, in every second, and to allow that to guide us to be the leaders, the light, the powerhouses that plow through because we have the kingship within us to overcome this exile, transform it to light, and bring about coming a Mashiach that we wait for every given moment. So Shavuos is not just about cheesecake. And it's not just about sushi. And it's not even just about the Ten Commandments. Because the Ten Commandments don't have very much value if you don't realize that they're being given to you because you're a king, you're a leader, you're a queen. Omar Malka Akar Tura, says the king, and the mountain moves. Look at Mount Ellis. Look, by the way, I'm not joking. Look at the light reflection on the mountain right now. It's incredible. That mountain is not an obstacle for us. Because we have Moshe, we have David, and most importantly, we have the Baal Shem Tov. All three are who connected to Shavuos to guide us how to carry the mission of Sinai, the Torah that was gifted to us, and the role that we were given, how to transform this world and make it the garden for God that He's yearning for. I remember when I was in yeshiva in Oklahoma, when I was a yeshiva student hanging out in Oklahoma City, they had a big billboard. I'll never forget it on I-40. It said, "Don't make me come down there," and it was signed God. And I never forget it. I was like, oh yeah, they never learned Chassidus. They would have been Jews, and Chassidus, they weren't. They were very evangelical. But they would have known that the billboard should say, please make this world a great place so I can finally come reveal myself there. Signed God. That's what we're doing here, and that's what Shavuos is. Don't cock around. Don't tell me it's Memorial Day weekend. The Memorial Day parade won't be till Monday. On Monday will be the parade, and until the parade, we're going to celebrate Zman Matan Teiraseinu, the day that God said, you and you and you and you, every single one of you, is part of Mamleches Kohanim Megoy Kodesh. You're a king, you're a queen. You get to change the world, transform the world, stick with God's vision, stick with God's Torah, and you're limitless. L'chaim, have a wonderful Yontif. If you're in Bozeman, wait for your email tomorrow. It's going to have the whole schedule for Thursday night, Friday night, Shabbos day. There'll be a whole schedule for the dinners, for the lunches, and the celebrations, the minyanim. We're going to rock and roll. And no bubamaisis. Sei gesund. Have a wonderful Yontif. And as the Rebbe would always say, Kabbalah Satorah B'Simcha B'Pnimis, may you receive the Torah with joy and inwardness. Sei gesund.
Bye.